Jacob's children grew up, becoming strong adults, continuing the legacy of their parents. Jacob and Rachel looked up at the night sky, filled with hope for the future and the protection of God and the goddess. Jacob's family sat together in peace, feeling the love and protection of a united family. Jacob tended to the plants in the garden, knowing that each plant was a symbol of perseverance and faith. Jacob's family took part in the big village festival, laughing together, connecting with the community, and enjoying the joy. Jacob and his son worked in the fields, sharing valuable lessons, continuing the family tradition. Jacob's family continued their peaceful life, teaching their children about love and care for others. Jacob's family stood together, looking toward the future, knowing they would always be together through any challenge. Jacob's family looked toward the sky, hope and faith overflowing in their hearts. Jacob sat alone by the fire, praying for peace and the protection of God and the goddess. Jacob's family continued their life filled with hope and happiness, with love and faith guiding them. Jacob's family stood together, looking toward a bright future, knowing they would always be strong and united. Jacob and Rachel looked at each other, their eyes full of faith and love, as a promise to always stand by each other. Jacob's family sat under the candlelight, sharing the joy and stories of the day, strengthening the family bond. Jacob's family prayed, knowing that God and the goddess's protection was always with them. Jacob's family looked toward the future, full of hope and faith in what God and the goddess would bring. Jacob and Rachel laughed with their children, joy and family love blending in the atmosphere. Jacob's family laughed together, a joyful and warm atmosphere filling the house. Jacob looked at his children, pride and hope filling his eyes. Jacob's family continued their life in peace, love, and unity, their strength. Jacob's family stood together, looking toward the horizon, knowing they were ready for every challenge ahead. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts with us. Hit like and subscribe to never miss other meaningful stories. Share this video with your friends and family so you can explore these wonderful biblical stories together. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to get the latest videos from us. Thank you for watching, wishing you a day filled with peace and hope. See you soon. Each dry bone began to move, coming together, each small piece slowly forming a body. This was the first sign of the miracle. This scene was unbelievable. The dry bones had begun to form into living bodies, standing up, becoming an army. The people of Israel were restored. The dry bones not only restored physically, but also revived spiritually and with renewed faith in God. It is God who brings life, and through this miracle, He showed that nothing is impossible for Him. This was not only a physical resurrection, but a rebirth of the soul, of faith, and of hope for the people of Israel. The people of Israel witnessed this miracle. They realized that they were not abandoned, and that God was always with them. Ezekiel knelt down, thanking God for making the dry bones live again. God gave them a new beginning, a new hope. From that day on, the people of Israel no longer feared. They realized that no matter how dry or empty they were, with faith in God, they would be revived. The people of Israel, once dry bones, now had life again. A revival not just of the body, but of the spirit. The people of Israel began to look at each other, realizing they were no longer abandoned. Hope had returned to their hearts. Ezekiel looked at his people, seeing the light of resurrection. A new future was beginning, a future woven by God's hands. The families of Israel knelt down, thanking God for the miracle. They were no longer dry bones. They were people reborn. Ezekiel spoke to them. This is the resurrection God has brought to us. We are no longer the defeated, but the ones revived in Him. The entire nation of Israel began to rebuild. From dry bones, they rose up, building a bright future. New life began to sprout, like trees growing from dry soil. Everything was coming back to life. Ezekiel was not just a witness, he was the guide. He had seen the resurrection of a people, not just physically, but in faith. The people of Israel had regained their strength, united and moving in one direction. They were no longer dry bones. They were a mighty army. Ezekiel taught them that this resurrection was not just a physical miracle. It was God's redemption, a reminder of His unconditional love. The people of Israel now had not just life, but a story of resurrection. They would tell this miracle to the generations to come. God had not abandoned them. He had restored the nation of Israel, not just physically, but in soul and faith. As the sun set, they knew this was not the end, but the beginning of a new era, an era full of hope and life. Ezekiel believed that with this restoration, the nation of Israel would never be the same again. They would live in God's grace and love. The people of Israel, with resurrection in their hearts, moved toward Jerusalem, where God's light shone, where new life began. Ezekiel stood watching the people of Israel working hard to rebuild. Every brick, every building was a symbol of resurrection. The people of Israel had learned an important lesson. When they were restored, there was no division, only unity and love for one another. Resurrection was not just physical. It was a restoration of the spirit and emotions. Each smile, each hug, was a testament to the power of faith. The temple of God, once forgotten in exile, was now being rebuilt. They worshiped God not just with words, but with actions and their hearts. Ezekiel saw light shining from the temple, a sign of God's presence. A revived people will always have His presence. The priests, who led the people of Israel in worship, now could offer sacrifices and pray for complete restoration. Ezekiel reminded the people of God's promise, "I will never forsake you. You will be restored and live in my grace." The people of Israel, now revived, sang songs of praise to God. They were no longer a dry people, but ones filled with grace. A new generation had been born, full of life and hope. They would tell the story of resurrection to future generations. Ezekiel looked toward the future, where God's light was shining. He knew that the people of Israel would never be forsaken again. The people of Israel now entered the Promised Land, not only physically but spiritually. This was the beginning of a new era. Ezekiel, along with the elders, looked ahead. They knew that with faith and God's love, the nation of Israel would forever prosper. The people of Israel stood on the mountaintop, looking down into the valley. They saw that there was no more darkness, only light and hope. Ezekiel knew that all that Israel had today was thanks to God's boundless mercy and grace. The people of Israel were not only restored spiritually, but physically. They were rebuilding the foundation for a strong future. The people of Israel stood under the clear sky, looking to a new future where resurrection had become a reality. The people of Israel looked towards the vast green fields, seeing abundance returning. The days of suffering were over. Now was the time of prosperity. Every building, every fallen wall was now being restored. The people of Israel were not only rebuilding their land, but their history and heritage. The restoration was not just in buildings, but in the hearts of the people. They helped one another. building a community of unity and love. The people of Israel had been revived, and now they had to make important decisions to build a strong future based on faith in God and in one another. They began to sow seeds again, not just of wheat, but of hope. Every harvest was a promise of life. Together, they shared meals, smiles, and love. Each of these moments was a testimony to the resurrection of the people of Israel. Ezekiel and the elders looked ahead, thinking about plans to lead the people of Israel into an era of peace and prosperity. Every new house built was a symbol of resurrection. The people of Israel not only regained their lives, but also found their faith in the future again. Every ritual in the temple was a thanksgiving to God for the resurrection, a sign that the people of Israel had returned to Him, strong and full of hope. Lessons of faith, history, and the miracles of God would be passed down to future generations, so they could continue to live in this resurrection. Other tribes began to come, joining the community of Israel. This was a sign that the resurrection was not only for one nation, but for all of humanity. The people of Israel, with resurrection in their hearts, welcomed other nations, building a peaceful and prosperous world. Ezekiel knew that resurrection was not just about the future, but about what they did today. Every action was a part of the process of regeneration. The roads were no longer dark, but filled with light. The cities were now full of life, hope, and faith. Ezekiel knew that this light was the presence of God, and with faith, the people of Israel would never be forsaken again. Ezekiel felt peace in his heart, knowing that the people of Israel had now been completely restored. The sunlight, as a sign of renewal, shone down on the people of Israel. Each new day was an opportunity to live in resurrection. Ezekiel prayed, thanking God for the resurrection of the people of Israel and for the promises filled with hope. Ezekiel looked up to the sky, knowing that with faith in God, the people of Israel would forever live in His light and grace. The villages were rebuilt, and the people of Israel began a new life, living in hope and love. Ezekiel and the elders stood firm, hand in hand, looking toward a future filled with hope and resurrection. Ezekiel saw the golden fields of ripe wheat, a symbol of the growth and success of the people of Israel. The resurrection had truly become a reality. Each child born was a new hope, a bright future. The people of Israel were living in a world filled with life and love. With hymns on their lips, the people of Israel had found peace in their hearts, knowing that this resurrection was a grace from God. Every work, every smile, every step was proof of the power of faith and love. The people of Israel were living in the joy of resurrection. As the sun sets, a new chapter begins. The people of Israel had endured challenges, but now they step into a future full of hope, peace, and prosperity. Ezekiel stood in the middle of a valley filled with dry bones. This scene represented the death and despair of the people of Israel. Ezekiel looked around, seeing dry bones scattered, with no sign of life. His heart was filled with sorrow and confusion. Then a mighty hand came down from heaven, and a brilliant light shone upon the valley of dry bones. It was a sign of God's presence. God called to Ezekiel, asking, "Son of man, can these bones live?" Ezekiel answered, "Lord, you alone know." Ezekiel understood that only God could bring life to these dry bones. He waited for his guidance. God told Ezekiel, "Prophesy to these dry bones. Say to them, 'Hear the word of the Lord.'" Ezekiel began to prophesy as God had commanded. His words echoed in the silent air. Suddenly, the dry bones began to move, coming together. A miracle was happening. Life was beginning to return. The bones formed into complete skeletons, but they still lacked life. They lay there, waiting for another miracle. God commanded a mighty wind to blow, bringing life. Immediately, the skeletons began to have flesh and skin, becoming complete humans. The dead rose up, becoming a vast army. They were alive again, strong and full of vitality. Ezekiel stood watching, feeling the power of resurrection. The people of Israel, through his prophecy, had been brought back to life by God. This was the greatest miracle Ezekiel had ever witnessed. The dry bones had come to life, a symbol of the resurrection of the people of Israel. Light from heaven shone down, proving that the resurrection was by God's power. The people of Israel had now been reborn. Ezekiel stood among the resurrected army, feeling the grandeur and power of faith, knowing that the people of Israel had been restored. These people were no longer dry bones. They were full of life, overflowing with faith and hope. One person in the crowd looked up to the sky, thanking God for the miraculous resurrection. Their faith was no longer in doubt. Ezekiel held the hand of one person in the army, giving them hope and encouragement, knowing that resurrection was not just a miracle, but a promise. They stood firm, hand in hand, knowing that they were no longer a crushed people, but a strong nation in faith. Ezekiel prayed, his heart full of gratitude. He knew that the people of Israel would never be forsaken, and this resurrection would last forever. They began rebuilding their lives, from barren lands to fertile gardens. Everything was being renewed, just like the resurrection they had just experienced. They worked together, each hand contributing to rebuild the nation. The resurrection was not just physical, but a rebirth in love and unity. Ezekiel looked up to the sky, his heart filled with faith. He knew that God had brought the people of Israel back to life, and they would never be forgotten. As the sun rose, a new day began, full of hope and brightness. The people of Israel had been reborn, and a new era began. The people of Israel gathered in the temple, offering thanks to God for the resurrection and new hope. Their prayers rose up as songs of praise. Ezekiel stood among his people, a radiant light on his face. He knew that God's promise had been fulfilled. Ezekiel left the temple, looking forward with unwavering faith. The people of Israel had been resurrected, and he knew that this resurrection would lead them to a bright future. Ezekiel walked through the streets of Jerusalem, witnessing a remarkable change. The city was now filled with life and hope. Ezekiel looked toward the horizon, his heart full of hope. He knew that the future of Israel would be full of promise and life. And so, the people of Israel were resurrected, not just physically, but spiritually. A new era began, the era of hope. Ezekiel looked back at the crowd, his heart at peace. He knew that God's word had been fulfilled, and the people of Israel had been saved. As the sun set, a new chapter in Israel's history began. This nation would live, and this resurrection would be the inspiration for generations to come. Ezekiel stood on the hilltop, his eyes gazing far into the distance. The people of Israel had been resurrected, and he knew that God would always be with them. Ezekiel walked on in peace, feeling a steadfastness in his soul. He knew that no matter the difficulties in the world, faith in God would always bring life. The people of Israel turned back, offering thanks. They knew that this resurrection would not only change them, but the whole world. Ezekiel continued walking, with hope in his heart. He knew that the journey of Israel had begun anew, and God would always guide them. As the sun rose once more, God's light illuminated every corner. The people of Israel had been resurrected, and a new era of hope began. Ezekiel walked through a lush field, each step affirming that life had been resurrected. Ezekiel paused, looking back at all that had happened. He knew that the people of Israel would never be forgotten again. They had risen and were loved by God. Ezekiel continued his journey, his path lit by the light of resurrection. He knew that the future of Israel would forever be bright. Under the quiet night sky, a bright star appeared, like a sign of hope and God's protection. Ezekiel looked up to the sky one last time, his eyes shining with faith. He knew that the resurrection of Israel was just the beginning of the miracles to come. Ezekiel looked up at the starry sky, feeling peace and the presence of God. He knew that no matter how great the challenges, the people of Israel would always be protected. Ezekiel continued walking, the crowd of Israel following. They knew that they had been resurrected, and this resurrection would lead them to a bright future. The people of Israel walked through a field of flowers, each step a symbol of renewal and complete resurrection. Ezekiel paused, looking back at the crowd of Israel. He saw the burning hope in their eyes, knowing that this nation had been resurrected, and they would never fail. Ezekiel stood among his people, feeling a strong connection with God. He knew that God's word would always illuminate their path. The families of Israel reunited, holding hands, their hearts full of joy. They knew that this resurrection was not only a physical return, but a rebirth of love and unity. Ezekiel walked among his people, the sunlight rising high, marking the resurrection and renewal in their hearts. Ezekiel prayed, asking God to grant the people of Israel restoration and guidance in the days ahead. Ezekiel looked toward the temple, where God's light shone down. He knew that the people of Israel had been revived, and this resurrection would always be a sign of God's love and protection. The priests offered gifts in the temple, thanking God for the resurrection of the people of Israel and for the new life he had given them. Ezekiel stood alone, looking toward the horizon. He knew that the people of Israel had been resurrected, and a new future awaited them. The sunlight slowly faded, creating a mysterious atmosphere. But in the hearts of Ezekiel and the people of Israel, the light of resurrection would always remain. Ezekiel continued his journey with determination in his eyes. He knew that the resurrection of the people of Israel was just the beginning, and they would rise up stronger. Ezekiel turned back to look at the people of Israel, seeing the hope in their eyes. This nation had been resurrected, and a new era of life had begun. Though the road ahead might still be difficult, Ezekiel knew that God's light would guide the people of Israel through every challenge. Ezekiel stood in the city of Jerusalem, closing his eyes, feeling the presence of God. He knew that God had resurrected this nation, and they would always stand strong in the new life. With the light shining over Jerusalem, Ezekiel knew that this was the beginning of a new era. The people of Israel had been resurrected, and they would live in the light of God. And so, the people of Israel were resurrected, not only physically, but spiritually. A new future opened up with boundless hope. Jerusalem shone brightly under the morning light, as if God was opening a new era. All the pain of this nation had passed, and a new future began. The crowd of Israel gathered in a holy place, singing praises to God together. They knew this resurrection would lead them into an era of prosperity and peace. The people of Israel prayed sincerely, God's light shining down on them, a sign of blessing and salvation. Ezekiel bowed before God, his heart full of reverence and gratitude. He knew that from now on, the people of Israel would never lack his guidance. Ezekiel stood on the mountaintop, gazing toward the promised land. He knew that after days of darkness, the people of Israel would enter the land full of God's promise. Ezekiel and the people of Israel moved forward, their hearts full of hope. They knew that each step they took was a step toward resurrection and new life. The children of Israel played, laughing among the lush fields. They were a symbol of rebirth and a bright future. The families of Israel lived in unity, holding hands in joy. They knew that they were a part of God's great plan. Ezekiel stood on the mountaintop, observing the entire nation of Israel moving forward. He felt the greatness of the miracle God had performed. Ezekiel looked into the distance, where God's light shone everywhere. He knew that the resurrection of the people of Israel was proof of his boundless power. And so, the people of Israel were revived, not just from death, but from suffering. A new era began, where they would live forever in the light and presence of God. Ezekiel stood among the people of Israel, a wave of hope spreading from each heart. They knew they were not just revived, but reborn in faith and love. The families of Israel gathered together, hand in hand, exchanging prayers. They had overcome great challenges, and now they lived in the peace God had given them. Ezekiel looked toward the horizon, where the sun rose, the new light of resurrection shining everywhere. Everything could return as it once was, if only there was faith and persistence. The people of Israel offered gifts in the temple, their hearts full of faith and reverence. They not only thanked God for the new life, but also deeply realized that they would forever live in His light. The priests taught about resurrection and hope, encouraging the people of Israel to trust in God's continuous presence in their daily lives. Ezekiel sat next to the elderly, listening to them tell stories about the difficult days, and he knew that each story was a lesson in resilience, a lesson in trusting resurrection. The people of Israel began rebuilding their community, working and learning from each other. Each person understood that resurrection was not only about returning to life, but also about spiritual renewal and unity. Ezekiel looked at the newly built houses, rooftops filled with hope. Each house was a sign of restoration and new life for the people of Israel. Ezekiel stood before the crowd and preached about resurrection, teaching them that new life comes not just from being saved, but from a change in the soul. Ezekiel looked up at the sky, seeing the clouds gather into the shape of God, and he knew that this resurrection was not just a miracle, but a sign of God's presence in the world. The people of Israel stood together, their hands raised high, praying in gratitude. They knew that their resurrection was a miracle that only God could give. Ezekiel looked back at the crowd, seeing hope in their eyes. He knew that this nation would never give up, for they had seen the power of resurrection. The people of Israel knelt down, thanking God for the great miracle He had done for them. They knew that under His guidance, they would always be protected and led. Ezekiel looked out at the sea, where the sunlight reflected, symbolizing endless hope. He understood that the people of Israel had passed through the darkness and were moving toward the light of God. The houses were rebuilt, their roofs adorned with bright colors. Children ran and played in the garden, symbolizing freshness and new life. Ezekiel opened the holy book, teaching the people of Israel that resurrection was not only about returning to life, but also about the revival of faith and strength in the soul. A family of Israel sat around the table, sharing the lessons they had learned from resurrection. Each story was a reminder of perseverance and hope. The priests continued to preach about spiritual rebirth, encouraging the people of Israel to live according to God's word and always remember their nation's resurrection. The people of Israel worked together in the fields, each farm a sign of restoration and peace. They were not only rebuilding the land, but also rebuilding their relationships with each other. Ezekiel and the people of Israel held a grand festival, singing and dancing in joy. Everyone felt the power of resurrection in their hearts. Ezekiel stood on the mountaintop, looking down at the people of Israel united together. He saw this resurrection as a miracle beyond time, the beginning of a new era. Ezekiel knelt down, full of gratitude and thanksgiving to God for this great miracle. He knew that this resurrection was not just a miracle, but a new beginning for the whole nation. The people of Israel stood under a starry sky, all gazing up with great hope. They knew that, no matter the challenges, God would always be with them, guiding them to peace. Ezekiel taught about the strength of faith, perseverance, and resurrection. He advised the people of Israel that only by believing in their own resurrection could they overcome any challenge. The children of Israel played and learned together, carrying with them faith in a bright future. They were the future of the nation, symbolizing vibrant life and hope that never fades. Ezekiel closed his eyes and prayed in silence. He felt God's presence, knowing that all miracles could happen when the people of Israel lived in absolute trust in Him. The people of Israel stood united, hands raised, symbolizing the power of faith. They understood that no matter how many challenges lay ahead, as long as they held firm faith in God, they would overcome. Ezekiel stood before the sea, looking toward the future, his heart full of faith and hope. He knew that with God by their side, the future of Israel would always be bright. The priests stood, offering prayers of thanksgiving to God for the miraculous resurrection He had granted to the people of Israel. They knew that all good things would come as long as they continued to live according to His will. The families of Israel sat together at the table, sharing stories of their restoration and the miraculous event of their nation. They felt God's love and protection in every moment. The people of Israel participated in a solemn ceremony, showing deep reverence for God. They knew that He had brought them through trials and given them the strength to rise. Ezekiel continued to teach that resurrection is not just the return of the body, but a rebirth in faith and perseverance. He encouraged the people of Israel to live with resilience and never give up. The people of Israel were rebuilding their city, each brick placed as a declaration of restoration and a bright future. Every small task contributed to rebuilding dreams. Ezekiel stood alone, gazing into the future of the people of Israel. He knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would remain strong and steadfast, because God was with them. The people of Israel stood together, hands clasped in faith, praying for God to grant them strength and guidance on their journey of restoration. The priests lit candles during the evening service, the light from the small flames reflecting in the night, a symbol of the light of hope that always shines in the darkness. Ezekiel stood beside an ancient tree, its branches stretching out, symbolizing stability and strong faith in the future. He knew that the people of Israel would always grow strong like this tree. The people of Israel walked together in the sunset, their hearts filled with hope and peace. They knew that resurrection had given them the strength to overcome any challenge. Ezekiel looked into the sky, praying that God would continue to bless the people of Israel, leading them on the path of light and salvation. The people of Israel returned to the land of their ancestors, starting anew with the belief that God would always guide them, from one generation to the next. The wheat fields stretched endlessly, a sign of a bountiful harvest. It was a restoration, not only of the body, but of dreams, aspirations, and hope. Ezekiel looked at the people of Israel united, with light shining in their eyes. He knew that the resurrection had given them immeasurable strength, a strength that nothing could shake. The bright sky, with the sun shining down on the people of Israel, created an image of eternal hope. He understood that this resurrection would always be a part of their great history. Ezekiel stood with the people of Israel, gazing toward the horizon full of promise, with a heart filled with faith in the future. No matter the challenges, they would always stand firm in God's guidance. Ezekiel lifted his head to the sky, as if marking the end of a long journey. He knew that the people of Israel would always move forward with faith in resurrection and a future full of hope. Ezekiel stood with the people of Israel in the garden, feeling the new life around them. Each blooming flower was a sign of restoration, a symbol of hope that would forever remain fresh. Ezekiel held a child in his arms, symbolizing the flourishing and bright future of the people of Israel. Every child was a gift from God, a hope for the generations to come. The people of Israel stood together, singing praises to God with all their hearts. Their voices echoed, spreading gratitude and faith in the great restoration that God had granted them. The people of Israel gave flowers to the priests, expressing their gratitude for their resurrection. Each flower was a thank you, showing their boundless gratitude to God. Ezekiel stood before the newly built temple, looking up to the sky, knowing that the resurrection was not just an event, but an eternal promise from God of new life for the people of Israel. The child of Israel wore a necklace, carrying within them a strong faith in God's promises. They would continue to live by the values passed down by their ancestors. The people of Israel walked through a field of sunflowers, the flowers facing the sunlight. It was a picture of renewal and hope, with each step affirming that the future was always full of promise. Ezekiel released a dove, symbolizing the freedom and peace that the people of Israel would enjoy after their resurrection. God had granted them freedom in spirit and in life. Ezekiel sat drawing a map, not just of land, but of the future of Israel, a future filled with hope, freedom, and overflowing with faith in God. The people of Israel participated in a peace ceremony, where each person felt connected with one another and with God. It was a sign of a new era, one where they would live in peace and prosperity. The sunlight shone through the clouds, illuminating the path that the people of Israel were walking. This path was not only guided by physical light, but also by the light of their faith in God. The people of Israel stood on the hilltop, looking down at the city of Jerusalem, which would be the center of resurrection and peace. They knew that God was always with them, guiding them forward. A powerful light from the heavens shone down upon the city of Jerusalem as a statement that the resurrection of the people of Israel would be forever, and God's guidance would never fade. The people of Israel held hands, forming an unbreakable circle. It was a symbol of unity in God, a strong connection that could never be torn apart. Ezekiel looked into the distance, seeing the sun setting behind the mountains. He knew that each day was a new beginning, a day full of hope for the people of Israel. The last rays of the sun touched Ezekiel's face, like a sign of the end of one journey, but also the beginning of new things and endless hope. A group of children from Israel played, their laughter echoing in the air. This was proof of life continuing, the resurrection of the people of Israel across generations. Ezekiel smiled, looking into the distance where the clouds were disappearing. He knew that the resurrection of the people of Israel would always be a source of inspiration for future generations. Ezekiel looked at the painting, where each detail told the story of resurrection and the miracles of God. Each stroke was a reminder of faith and hope. The people of Israel looked toward the horizon, where the sun had risen, symbolizing a new day, a future filled with hope and clarity. Ezekiel prayed, together with the people of Israel, thanking God for the resurrection he had given them. The prayer was full of gratitude and faith in a bright future. Ezekiel and the people of Israel looked toward the mountaintop, where the shining clouds were like a sign of divine guidance. A promising future awaited ahead. Ezekiel smiled, confident in the future of the people of Israel. He knew that their resurrection was not just a story, but an eternal promise from God. Ezekiel stood in the sunlight, gazing toward the hopeful horizon. He knew that this resurrection would inspire future generations. The people of Israel walked together, heading toward a bright future they had found in the resurrection. Each step was a reaffirmation of their faith and hope in God. The last rays of the sun shone on Jerusalem, creating a hopeful scene, reminding us that no matter the circumstances, God's resurrection and creativity will always prevail. The people of Israel looked towards the clear sky, as if seeking guidance from God. They knew that this resurrection was not just an outward change, but an inner transformation. A person from Israel knelt down, hands raised, offering thanks to God for the grace and resurrection he had granted their nation. The whole community prayed together, feeling peace in their hearts. The sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the path the people of Israel were walking. They knew that God had led them down the right path, the path of life and hope. Children ran and played on the green fields, laughing freely. This was the true resurrection, a life filled with joy and freedom in God. Ezekiel stood on the hilltop, looking down at the villages growing and thriving. This was the result of resurrection, a community filled with hope, overflowing with life. The people of Israel worked together to rebuild their homeland with newfound strength and faith. Every brick they laid was a step toward the bright future they had always dreamed of. The sunset cast a warm and peaceful atmosphere over the city. The people of Israel felt God's presence in every moment. Ezekiel and the people of Israel walked through a wheat field, where God's prosperity and blessings were evident. This was a picture of a future overflowing with life. Ezekiel stood by the riverbank, feeling the strong flow of water. Just like this river, the resurrection of the people of Israel would continue to flow forever, unstoppable. A group of people from Israel gathered in a ceremony, singing songs of praise to God. They shared joy and gratitude for the miracles that God had done for them. Ezekiel looked into the distance, where the moving clouds painted a picture of change. He knew that the people of Israel had entered a new era, a time of change and eternal resurrection. The people of Israel stood firm, looking towards the rising sun, the first light of a new day. They knew their lives would always be guided by God's light. Ezekiel smiled, sighing with relief. He knew that this resurrection was not just a physical revival, but a revival in faith and hope. Ezekiel stood on the mountaintop, extending his hands as if welcoming the resurrection. He believed that the people of Israel would always live in God's light. The people of Israel looked up to the sky, where a bright star shone. This star was a symbol of resurrection, new life, and God's eternal light. The sun slowly set, but its light still illuminated every corner, reminding us that this resurrection would never end. It would last forever. Ezekiel smiled, proud of what the people of Israel had overcome. He knew that God would always be with them, guiding them to a future full of hope. The people of Israel stood under a star-filled sky, looking up with gratitude. Each star was a symbol of every promise God had made to them. Children laughed and played freely in the lush garden. A new life was beginning, full of hope and joy. Ezekiel looked at a lush tree, symbolizing new life. Just like the tree, the people of Israel had been resurrected and were beginning to sprout and grow. The people of Israel sat together under the shade of a tree, sharing meals and talking about the future. They felt a strong connection with each other and with God. Ezekiel stood on the mountaintop, looking at the growing city of Jerusalem. He saw a thriving community, a testament to the great resurrection of the people of Israel. The people of Israel gathered in worship services to praise and thank God for the miracles He had performed. Ezekiel looked at the painting depicting the resurrection of the people of Israel, where the dry bones turned into living people. He knew this was just the beginning of a long journey. The people of Israel knelt, offering sincere prayers. They knew that their resurrection was not just for themselves, but for the future of their children and generations to come. The people of Israel stood before a statue of God, hands raised, offering thanks. They understood that they had been saved, and their faith in God had rescued them from destruction. The sun set, but its light still shone, symbolizing God's eternal presence in the lives of the people of Israel. Ezekiel looked back at the path he had traveled, where everything had changed from dry bones to life filled with hope. The Israelite community was rebuilding new homes, creating a future for the next generation. This was the result of resurrection, a new beginning. A new temple was built, symbolizing the spiritual resurrection of the people of Israel. This was the place where they found God's presence and experienced new life. The people of Israel held hands and walked together towards a bright future. Every step was a commitment to their faith and hope in their resurrection. Ezekiel stood there, looking at the horizon, where God's light shone brightly. He knew that the journey of the people of Israel was just beginning. The people of Israel knelt in the new temple, offering prayers of thanks to God for this great resurrection. The group of Israelites walked on the bright path, heading towards a bright future. Each step was a testimony to their faith and resurrection. Ezekiel stood on the mountaintop, looking at the people of Israel entering a new era. He felt God's powerful presence. The people of Israel prepared to build a new temple in Jerusalem, where they would continue to offer praise and thanks to God. Ezekiel walked through the city of Jerusalem, seeing the houses and temples being built. He could feel the powerful transformation taking place. Ezekiel looked at a child playing in the area of the new temple, a picture of hope, new life, and the bright future of the people of Israel. The painting depicting the resurrection of the people of Israel hung in the new temple, reminding everyone of God's infinite power and His promises. A group of Israelites stood under the sunlight, praying for a peaceful and blessed future. They knew that this resurrection was part of a greater plan God had for them. The families of Israel gathered together, sharing the story of the resurrection. They knew that from now on, everything would change forever. The sunlight shone down from the sky, symbolizing God's guidance and protection over the people of Israel in this new journey. The people of Israel walked through the gate into the new temple, stepping into a new era, where life and hope would always be renewed. Ezekiel looked at the bright clouds, feeling a revelation from God. He knew that the resurrection was not just a historical event, but a promise for all generations. The families of Israel knelt together in prayer, offering thanks and praise to God for resurrecting them from the dry bones. The sunlight shone on an ancient tree, a symbol of the long-lasting and enduring life that the people of Israel would receive from God. Ezekiel turned back to look at the crowd, his eyes full of hope. He knew that God would always be with them, guiding them every step of the way. All the people of Israel stood together, hands raised, offering thanks to God for what He had done for them. The sky shone brightly with sunlight, a sign that this resurrection would forever shine in the hearts of every person. Ezekiel looked toward the future, where faith and hope would always shine brightly, guiding the people of Israel into a new era. The people of Israel held hands, walking together in peace and unity. They knew they had been saved and would never be left alone. Ezekiel bowed his head in gratitude, feeling the greatness of what God had done for the people of Israel. The people of Israel looked toward the future, their faces full of hope and faith. They knew their lives had been renewed, and they were stepping into a new era. The families of Israel gathered together, offering prayers in peace and strong faith in God. The sun set over the sea, signaling the end of one day, but also the beginning of a hopeful future for the people of Israel. Ezekiel looked back at the people of Israel with reverence. He knew that God had done a miraculous thing, and the people would never forget. The night sky, with its shining stars, was a sign of the unwavering faith the people of Israel had for God. The lamps in the new temple shone brightly, symbolizing God's presence, guiding the people of Israel into a new future. The families of Israel gathered around the table, sharing meals full of joy, symbolizing unity and love in God. Ezekiel looked toward the horizon, where God's light still shone. He knew that the people of Israel would always be guided by him. Ezekiel's painting of the resurrection hung in the temple, proving the power of faith and the resurrection that God had brought. The families of Israel lit candles in the night, offering prayers for a future full of hope, peace, and faith in the resurrection. Ezekiel stood with the people of Israel, hands raised, honoring God for giving them the resurrection and a new era. The sun rose from the sea, symbolizing a new beginning and the resurrection God had brought to the people of Israel. Ezekiel stood in the new temple, light shining on his face, reflecting the faith and hope in his heart. The people of Israel walked through the gate, heading toward the light, stepping into a future full of hope that God had prepared for them. Ezekiel turned back to look at the temple, where light shone everywhere. He knew that this resurrection would bring light to all people. The people of Israel stood looking at the resurrection painting, understanding that this resurrection would change everything. They were part of the great story God was writing. The families of Israel offered prayers in the early morning, offering thanks and praise to God for the resurrection. The sunlight shone on a large painting in the temple, the painting of the resurrection of the people of Israel. It was a testament to the power of faith. The people of Israel worshiped together in the temple, offering thanks for the resurrection God had accomplished. Ezekiel stood in the temple, sunlight shining on his face, expressing faith and hope in the resurrection that God brought. Thank you for watching the story of Israel's resurrection. What have you learned from this story? We hope that you will find faith and hope in your own life. Leave your thoughts in the comments below and share your reflections on the story we just explored together. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell to not miss future inspirational videos. We're so glad to have you on this journey with us. Keep watching and share your faith with those around you.
Do you love meaningful Bible stories? Top 7 Bible Stories channel will bring you inspiration and peace every day. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments section. Your sharing is the motivation for us to bring more stories. Top 7 Bible Stories. Good stories, beautiful meanings.